Hi guys, alrighty, this is our sensation perception. So hopefully you are watching this one before you watch perception, but either one's fine. They do go hand in hand together. So this one is going to be about your five senses. So we're going to cover sight, touch, smell, taste, and hearing. Alright, so difference between sensation and perception. Sensation is going to be actually experiencing physical things in the environment, the air, like I'm physically touching something, physically eating something, whereas perception is how we select, organize, and interpret sensations. So most of us are probably going to have similar sensations. So if I'm eating a lemon, we can all kind of experience the sensation of it being sour. Perception, though, is different for all of us. Some of us are going to view that as really delicious. Some of us are going to view it as too sour. And so perception is where it's going to differ more. Alrighty, so this one, a confusing pair between this one and a couple more slides. So this is basically where we're going to take the big picture and then we're going to break it down to the bottom. So this is the one where we talked about the puzzle. So this is top-down processing. So we are going to use our prior experiences and our knowledge to be able to break down information. So when you're doing a puzzle, which maybe some of you guys are doing a lot of right now because we're all on quarantine and shelter in place, so you have a lot of time. Most of us would prefer to have the cover box so that way we know what our end goal is. And because we have this top picture, we're then able to use all the little pieces to then create the picture. Okay, so most of us, if we're going to read this really quickly, you're probably going to read it as the cat, even though really it says the whatever that is. But because we are drawing from our prior experience and expectations, we are going to see that as the cat and fill it in. So it's going to go from top down. Okay, remember when we read this all together in unison as a class? You can pretty much read it all the way through, even though the letters are jumbled, because you guys have the experience of reading and filling in words. And so we're going to use our top-down processing to be able to read this paragraph. Okay, bottom-up processing is going to be taking the small pieces and building it up to the top. And so we talked about this when we all started reading and writing. For most of us, when they're teaching us how to write the letter A, they're just simple lines to us, but eventually we start doing building blocks of, okay, these lines equal a letter, A. A, what does that stand for? A for apple. And then we go from letters to words to phrases to sentences and so on. So it's taking the small pieces and then you're creating the whole. So you have top down and then you have bottom up. Okay, and then we have detection. So we have absolute threshold and difference threshold. So this is the one where I would ask you guys in class, at what point do you see yellow? And so for some of us, they're saying that the majority of us, if we're not colorblind at all, you're gonna all see yellow by the time you get to this light bulb. So then that would be your minimum amount. That'd be your absolute threshold. Some of you might see yellow in this light bulb. Some of you guys might even see a faint yellow here. And so wherever you detect the yellow for the first time, the least amount it takes, that is going to be your absolute threshold. So definition, again, is the minimum stimulus needed to detect a particular stimulus 50% of the time. So another example of this is a hearing test that we've all taken when we're in school. So you're going to click the button, and every time you hear a faint sound, you're going to click it. And as long as you can hear it 50% of the time, that is going to be considered your absolute threshold. Okay, then we talked about subliminal threshold, which is just one level underneath absolute. So this is where we talked about subliminal messages, and we also did the whole backmasking where it was we played music backwards. And so for them, they're saying it's kind of like in our subconscious or unconscious where it's we're not quite sure that it's there, but it's still going into our brains. And so sometimes we might pick that up. So let's say in movies or in advertising, they have a lot of product placement. Some people would say that's a subliminal message because you're picking up on it, even though you're not consciously aware you're doing it. So then you might want to go buy that product afterwards. Okay, then we have difference threshold. Okay, so every time you hear difference threshold, you want to think of a few things. Okay, one, difference threshold is the same thing as just noticeable difference, so J and D. And then the person that came up with this is going to be, who is it? Anyone remember? Okay, it's going to be Weber. So it's Weber's law. So you want to always connect Weber to difference threshold to JND or just noticeable difference. So this one is, at what point do you notice a difference between the two yellows? Or at which point do you notice that one drink has more sugar than the other? At what point do you notice a different shade of blue versus this other light of blue? So at whatever point you notice a difference, that is going to be your difference threshold. So Weber's law is saying that it needs to be it needs to be a minimum percentage rather than like a number. So we talked about weight. So according to Weber, he's saying that for most of us, regardless of how much we weigh, it takes about a 2% difference in our weight for most of us to go, hey, I think I've either lost weight or I've gained weight. So for someone that's 150 pounds, it would take them 3 pounds for them to notice a difference. Whereas if you're 300 pounds, it's going to take about 6 pounds, because these numbers are basically 2% of your actual weight. So that's difference threshold, or Weber's law, or just noticeable difference. Okay, this one is super important. This one is signal detection theory. So this is basically saying is our ability to detect a presence or faint stimulus amongst background noise. So that is going to be determined on your experience, your expectations, your motivation, and your level of fatigue. So whenever we're super tired, a lot of us might miss signals, whether we're driving or if we're in class or someone's talking to us. But if you know that you are either on high alert or you have slept well, then you're going to be more likely to detect the signal. Okay, an example of signal detection theory is going to be this idea called the cocktail party effect. So this is the degree to which the signal can be distinguished from background noise. So the cocktail party effect is us being able to hear our names in the environment. So my signal detection theory for my name being called Miss Yen is really high when I'm at school, because there's a bunch of you, and the chances of someone saying, hey, Miss Yen, I have a question, is really high. So then my signal detection, my cocktail party effect, is on high alert. But if I'm at home or, in a different state somewhere, I'm not going to really hear my name because I just don't anticipate you guys being there. But I will say when I go to the Brand Mall, I normally see a student there. So my detection again would then rise, because the chances of someone saying Miss Yen is probably a lot higher. Or I might misinterpret words like pen being Miss Yen or then being Miss Yen as my name. So that would be your signal detection theory. I think in the FRQ that I gave you guys for this assignment was the soldier. And so when he's on duty, his signal detection is going to be a lot higher for intruders rather than when he's not on duty. Okay, so then we had the signal detection theory matrix. So at what point we hear signals or miss signals or think we hear signals, but they aren't really there. Okay, so if there is a signal, so we ring a bell, you hear it, that is going to be a hit. Okay, if I ring a bell, okay, but you don't actually hear it, that is going to be a false alarm. I'm sorry, just kidding. I was going the other way. So this one is if you, hold on. I'm like, I just can totally confuse myself. Just kidding. Okay, here we go. Okay, so there's a signal. You say that you heard it. Oh, here we go. Okay, wipe off this whole slide for a second. Start over. Okay, I ring the bell. I was reading wrong. I ring the bell. You say you heard it. That would be a hit. Okay, I ring the bell, but you don't think you heard it. That's going to be a miss. Okay, I did not ring any bell, but you think you heard something. That's a false alarm. Okay, I don't ring anything, and you also don't hear anything. That is a correct rejection. So sorry for the confusion. Okay, this one is what we talked about, where if you are wearing something for a long period of time, so like my glasses, my earrings, my ring, your clothes, your socks, most of the time we are going to not notice it, because that's called sensory adaptation. You adapt to sensations that are ongoing. So it's a diminished sensitivity as a consequence of constant stimuli. So most of us don't sit here and go, oh, I'm wearing socks right now, because you're just kind of constantly wearing socks. And so the constant stimulation is going to make you have a decreased sensitivity to it. Okay, another version of this is going to be desensitization. This is where you are, again, becoming less sensitive to ongoing stimuli. So we've talked about, you know, living next to train stations or next to an airport or to like a lot of traffic or a freeway overpass. Those of you that live next to it and you hear it all the time, you probably rarely even notice the sounds. And so recently I was FaceTiming with my friends, and Mochi, my dog, was with me, and his breathing to me, I know it's loud, but like I'm so used to it, and I've become desensitized to it. But my friends on FaceTime were like, "Oh my gosh, your dog is so loud. Like, can you not have him in the room?" And so that's kind of how it is that if it's ongoing, you're going to become less sensitive. Okay, the other example I used in class for this, which I know was kind of gross, was when we talked about going into public restrooms. A lot of times when you go into a restroom, it's like, ew, like what does that smell? And instead of us plugging our nose and unplugging it, because every time you unplug it, it's a new smell, you ideally should just go, you know, just smell it in, because the more ongoing it is, the less you're going to actually smell it. Gross, I know. All right, now moving on to vision. So the fancy word for vision is going to be phototransduction. It's pretty much the conversion of light energy into neural impulses that the brain can then understand. Okay, here's the eyeball. Do you guys remember how to draw the eyeball? Do you remember the location, the function, and then also the 10-step process of vision? Hopefully we do. Okay, so this part is going to be the cornea, which is pointing to the white transparent layer. Okay, this one's going to be the iris, which is the color part of your eye. It's going to control the pupil, okay, which is going to let light in. And then the lens is going to then focus our image. Okay, over here is where the retina is, so where your rods and cones. Okay, this part in the middle is going to be your fovea, where cones cluster. Over here is going to be where we have a blind spot because there are no receptor cells. And then this little spiny thing is going to be your optic nerve, which then sends information to your brain. Okay, again, definitions or functions. Cornea is a transparent tissue where the light enters the eye. It's basically the white part of your eye. The iris is the muscle that expands and contracts the change to the size of the pupil. And then the pupil is basically going to change shape when it's letting light in. Again, the lens is going to focus and adjust. And then retina is rods and cones. Hopefully remember what rods and cones stand for. All right, so the retina, again, is your rods and cones. So this is your black, white, and color. This one, we have the optic nerve, which is, it's going to carry information from the eye to the brain. Sorry, that's my dogs. Blind spot is going to basically be where there's not going to have any receptor cells. Okay, and then the fovea is where the cones cluster because it's in the center and it has color. Alrighty, so again, cones is going to be all of your C words. Okay, so cones, it's in the center and it deals with color, whereas rods are going to be in the peripheral and deals with black and white. Okay. So remember, this is the activity we did where we had the marker. So if I was to look straight forward and I was to bring, do I even have something? Okay, let's say I have my glasses. If I was to bring this over here, if I'm looking forward, whatever point I notice something just there, that's going to be my rods because it's black and white. But I won't be able to identify the color of the glasses until it gets closer to the center. Then I can see it, and then that is going to be color. Oh my gosh, my dogs. I apologize. Okay, again, rods is going to be black and white, whereas cones are going to be color. So C and center, and rods are peripheral. Okay, then we have bipolar ganglion cells. Basically going to receive messages, and then it's going to transmit to the optic nerve, and the optic nerve is going to go to your brain. To your visual cortex. Okay, so remember the visual pathway. It goes from cornea, iris, pupil, lens, retina, fovea, bipolar, ganglion, optic nerve, thalamus, visual cortex, or occipital nerve. So the acronym was CAN, I, P, like, really, fast, before, going, out, to, vote. Okay, so can I pee like really fast before going out to vote, essentially the pathway. Okay, then shape detection. So just different parts of our brain allow us to figure out different shapes for faces, houses, chairs, yada, yada. Okay, this is the one where our eyes are super cool, and same thing with our brains. We're able to see everything all in one swoop. And so that's called parallel processing. So at the same time, we can determine color, motion, form, and depth of objects, animals, things around the world. Okay, so this is the guy who came up with theories of color. His name, oops, just kidding. It's the trichromatic theory, and it's going to be Young Helmholtz. So then the three colors are going to be blue, green, and red. Okay, so he's saying that we have these three photoreceptors for color. Young Helmholtz, trichromatic theory. Okay, so again, if you aren't colorblind at all, you should be able to see a number. So this should say 74 to you, and then this one should be 45. And then if you are missing any of the color receptors, then you're not going to be able to read some of the numbers in here. Oh, and quick review, color blindness is more common in men than in females. Okay, this is the one where we're going to be able to, remember we were to stare at the middle of this, and then once I turn to the next page, you should be able to see the opposite color. So this is called opponent process color theory. So you should be able to see the British flag on the next page, because the opposite color of, let's write this down, of green is going to be red, the opposite color of yellow is going to be blue, and the opposite color of black is going to be white. Okay, so that is called the opponent process theory. The person that came up with it was Herring. So the way we try to remember this is that blue and yellow was our color, so VHS. This was going to be Christmas. It's Christmas. I'm not gonna write that all out. And then we said black and white could be Oreos or pandas or zebras, whatever you guys wanted. Okay, this is color constancy, which is more in our perception chapter. So this is basically saying that the context does change our perception of color. So this is the one where we watched Brain Games, and then they had the different swatches of, I think it was gray, and depending on the context, it would change our perception of the gray. But if you were to put your finger like this, then both of them end up being the same color. Or the example I gave in class, again, was my nail polish. It's pretty much where, my nail polish was one color in the salon, and then it changes in, my house, and then my bathroom light, and then the school's light. But does the color actually change? No, it's all remaining constant. Alrighty, this is the one where it allows us to detect certain features like edges, angles, and movement. This was in your practice FRQ where the soldier was able to use his feature detectors to be able to detect edges, angles of a gun or a bush or an intruder or the movement of different items in his surroundings. So feature detectors. All right, so that was all eyesight. Now moving on to audition, which is hearing. So the fancy word for hearing is going to be acoustical transduction. Okay, remember loudness of sound. It's important that you guys don't expose yourselves to above 85 decibels or you can have permanent hearing loss. So all of you, what is that cool thing you guys all use now? Like the sound cancellation earbuds, or I can't remember what they're called. I know they're expensive and they're fancy and they work really well. But if you are basically like just having music in your ears really loud to the point where outside people can hear your music, you're probably above 85 decibels, which is then damaging to your ears. So I know you guys are home by yourselves a lot of times now. And I know music is a huge part of your lives. Just make sure you're not listening to it too loudly because you don't want permanent hearing loss. Okay, so then we have different words. We have pitch and hertz, okay? So anytime you hear the word pitch, you wanna go with hertz. And anytime you hear loudness, you wanna go with decibels. So the cheesy trick was the higher the pitch, the more it hurts my ears, okay? Loudness is, I have no cool tricks or cheesy tricks for this one, okay? So loudness is going to be amplitude, and decibels. So amplitude is going to make it louder. It's measured in decibels. Oops, going back. Okay, one other word for pitch is frequency. Okay, so 3 words. Pitch, frequency, hertz go together. Loudness, amplitude, decibels go together. Okay, then you have the structures of your ear. Again, we have outer, middle, and inner ear. Okay, so we have it about to be right here and then right here. Okay, in your outer ear is going to collect sounds. This is going to include your auditory canal and your eardrum. Okay. Then we have the middle ear. The acronym is HAS because we have the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup, which is pretty much, let me get rid of this. It's pretty much, it looks like those 3 things. It looks like a little hammer, a little anvil, and a little stirrup in our ears. Okay, then we have your inner ears, which we also said had an acronym, even though it's not in the same order here. It was CVS. So you have the cochlea, you have the vestibular sacs, and then you have the semicircular canals. Okay, and the inner ear is what helps with balance. And so a lot of times if you're experiencing a lot of dizziness or vertigo, most doctors are going to first check your ears to see if there's anything wrong with that and see whether or not that is affecting your balance and motion. Okay, so the cochlea is going to be the coiled bony fluid filled, and because it's fluid filled, that's kind of what makes us dizzy. So those of you that like roller coasters that go upside down and you enjoy that kind of stuff, if you feel dizzy later, it's because your head is moving back and forth, and so the fluid is messing around in your brain and in your ears, and so that's why we feel off balanced or dizzy. Okay, then we have 2 theories for audition. The first theory is called place theory. So this is basically saying that sound frequencies stimulate the basilar membrane. Okay, so it's right here on specific places, resulting in perceived pitch. So depending on where it's landing on the basilar membrane, that is going to determine whether or not we hear a high or low pitch. And so it's about placement. So that's place theory. Okay, this theory is about frequency. So it's called frequency theory. So this one states that the rate of nerve impulses traveling up the auditory nerve matches the frequency of a tone, thus enabling our sense of pitch. So the other one's about placement. This one is about the rate of travel and how it matches our pitch. All right, now moving on to our last few senses. We have touch and smell and taste. So when it comes to touch, when it comes to touch, we have pressure, warmth, cool, and pain. Okay, this was the activity that we used the little toothpicks where we broke it in half, and then I had you guys kind of like poke your friends. And so this is basically the 2-point threshold, that different parts of our body have different sensitivity levels. So your fingertips are really sensitive. I would say your lips are, your neck would be too, but not like your elbows or your back. And so what we did was we took 2 points and we kind of poked the skin. And then things like your back, which isn't that sensitive, it would take a wider distance for you to say, oh, I feel 2 points. Whereas on your fingertips, it would take just a small distance for us to be like, oh, I feel 2 points, which then proves that our fingertips are more sensitive than our back, which is why if we got a paper cut on your fingers, even though they're tiny, it would hurt really badly. But if you get a cut on your back, most of us probably wouldn't even notice it. And so that's why sometimes we'll get bruises in different areas that we're not really aware of. But if I was to, like punch you in the face versus punching you in the back, you're going to obviously feel it more on your face because it's just more sensitive. Not that I would ever do that, obviously. Okay, then we have this idea called gate control theory. This is pretty much where we have a floodgates for pain. And so this is where our spinal cord is either going to block or allow it to be sensed. So for some of you guys that are athletes or you're doing something, if you're like in the flow of your game and then you actually had injured yourself, a lot of you might not feel anything because your gates are closed because you're distracted by playing or it's adrenaline. But then once the game is over and you actually sit down, then the gates are going to flood open and then you're going to feel all the pain from the injury. Alrighty, then this is the one where we will feel pain in the absence of an actual limb. So this is called phantom limb pain. And so this is basically saying that whenever you lose a limb, even though maybe like my hand isn't present, but I still might feel like itchy in my palms or like I wanna, like they feel sore even though my hand's actually missing. So it's called phantom limb pain. And one of the ways they've been trying to treat this is through mirror therapy, that if they have a mirror here and then this actual hand or leg is moving, then whatever is projected onto the mirror is then gonna make the actual missing limb feel more comfortable. Okay, now onto taste. So taste, we have different flavors. Can you name all of these? Okay, so we have different taste receptors. We have sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and the new one is umami, which is fresh chicken or meat. Okay, keyword here is sensory interaction. That for a lot of us, taste is not just about the actual taste receptors, but it's also about the smell, about the texture, about the temperature. What does it look like? Some of you guys won't eat things simply because it looks weird or because it smells weird. And so when it comes to sensory interactions, we're combining all of our senses to then actually either like or dislike the taste of foods. Okay, flavor food involves taste, but it's also more complex. Onions and apples, you guys should try this at home if you're bored, is if you were to plug your nose, because our sense of smell and our sense of taste go hand in hand. So if you were to actually plug your nose, an apple and an onion would actually have similar taste qualities, but then their flavors are going to differ greatly. Okay, so again, taste is determined on odor, texture, temperature, etc. Okay, when it comes to our taste buds, we have a bunch of them on our tongues. If you're brushing your teeth, oftentimes you'll brush them every day, or if you burn your tongue, it's gonna make it so the flavor isn't quite there. And so unlike our hair cells, our taste buds actually grow back. So just because you have like a numbing of your tongue, it does grow back and your taste does ultimately, the flavor comes back as well. And also one more thing about sensory interaction. So again, our nose and our taste go hand in hand. So that's why sometimes when you guys are sick, food flavors are going to go away because if your nose is stuffy, then food's going to taste really bland. Okay, again, this is the activity we did in class with the, whatchamacallit, what was it? The miracle fruits. So no, that was the day we did it. We did this, but this is when we tried all the different foods. This is kind of an older theory. Oh my gosh, my dogs. So sorry, you guys. They're crazy right now from being like in the house all day. Okay, so our tongue, supposedly the tip of our tongue has sweetness. Bitterness is in the back of our tongue. Sourness is along the sides. And then saltiness is going to overlap. So that was the day that we had, I think, a lemon. We had cookies. We had chips that day. And supposedly it was to feel different on our tongues. Okay, and then the last thing when it came to smell. Okay, so again, review for brain parts. The thalamus is what controls all the other sensations. The only one it does not control is going to be your sense of smell. And so what does control sense of smell is this word, if you guys can read it. It is olfactory. Okay? So again, thalamus controls all the other senses. Olfactory controls smell. Alrighty, guys, that is all 5 of your senses. The one that's attached to this chapter is going to be perception. So just make sure you're watching both of them before you do your assignment because both of those chapters go hand in hand. Bye-bye, guys. I'm like, how do I end this?